Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Monday, November 18th. I'm Justin Sazier in for Elizabeth Arkalian. Dozens of trains go through the city of Tehachapi every day, and lately officials there have been increasingly wondering what happens if disaster strikes.
They are not required to notify any local authorities when an incident happens, a derailment, for instance.
We'll hear more about who is in charge of operating the railroads in just a few minutes. But first, today's headlines. Health officials are issuing a recall notice for organic carrots that might be in your fridge. Carrots supplied by Bakersfield-based Grimway Farms have been pulled from store shelves because they're contaminated with E. coli. In at least 18 states, over 24 people have been sickened and one has died. The carrots were sold under different brand names at stores like Trader Joe's, Sprouts, Target, and Walmart. A complete list and more information is available on the FDA website. Grimway Farms is one of the world's largest producers of carrots. Fresno County has confirmed its first case of bird flu in a human. The county's Department of Public Health says the illness was found in a person who had recently been in contact with infected cattle at a dairy farm. The resident is reporting mild symptoms and is isolating in their home. Human cases of bird flu statewide have now jumped to 26, with most of them in Tulare County. An independent report found that a Fresno police detective who violated department policies was never disciplined due to a missed deadline. KVPR's Esther Quintanilla reports.
An internal investigation found the detective violated two policies, one for being at fault in a collision and another for driving a department vehicle while off duty. The incidents happened last year. Though the investigation was completed in March, the detective was never disciplined. The Fresno Bee reports that it's due to a rule that says officers must be notified about discipline within a year of their alleged misconduct. Beyond that, an officer cannot be disciplined. Concerns about this policy have been raised to Interim Police Chief Mindy Casto, but the department declined to comment on the issue. Meanwhile, the detective involved has not been named. For KVPR News, I'm Esther Quintanilla.
Fewer students are attending public schools in California. Over the past 2 decades, CalMatters reports the state has seen a 7% decline in K-12 enrollment. That figure is expected to climb in the next decade. This could spell trouble for schools since much of their funding is tied to attendance. A combination of factors like lower birth rates and slowing immigration are to blame. Major urban areas like Los Angeles and Oakland have seen the highest drops. Former House Speaker and Bakersfield Congressman Kevin McCarthy says he doesn't expect President-elect Donald Trump's nomination for Attorney General to go through. McCarthy told Bloomberg Television last week he expects Matt Gaetz's nomination to be rejected by the Senate next year. Gaetz, you might recall, orchestrated the effort to oust McCarthy as House Speaker. McCarthy later stepped down. Gaetz's nomination has led to calls for the House Ethics Committee to release a report into allegations against him.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from Fresno Mazda, part of the Prieto Automotive family, with special holiday financing deals on select models through the end of the year at the new showroom on Blackstone and Barstow. Information at myfresnomazda.com.
And now to our main story. It was February 3rd, 2023, when disaster struck the small Ohio town of East Palestine.
A freight train went off the tracks.
The crash led to fire, and authorities said they drained hazardous chemicals to avoid an explosion. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes, and schools and businesses shut down.
That's NPR's Steve Inskeep and Layla Fadel speaking on Morning Edition just days after the train derailment. The disaster drew national criticism for the train operator Norfolk Southern. But the risk of those kinds of incidents aren't isolated to just one place in the country or one company. In Kern County, officials with the City of Tehachapi have long had their own worries about a disaster like the one in East Palestine. Tehachapi's railroad history dates back to the 1800s. Most trains passing through the Central Valley go through there before their final destination. And officials have seen more than one derailment west of their city just this year. Companies like Union Pacific and BNSF both operate trains along the railroad, but the rail itself is actually owned by Union Pacific. Greg Garrett is Tehachapi's city manager. He's been raising concerns over the lack of an emergency notification system for years. He recently joined KVPR's Elizabeth Arkalian for a conversation where he says he's particularly concerned about the communication process should disaster strike along the rails.
The squeaky wheel tends to get the grease, right? And so the railroads are regulated by the NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board, and agencies below them. They are not required, as I understand it, they are not required to notify any local authorities when an incident happens, a derailment, for instance. And in Tehachapi, since between January 1st and mid-October, there were 17 incidents. 4 or 5 derailments. I'd have to dig into that a little more because a lot of times, and hence the problem, we are not notified. When I say we, I'm talking about Kern County Fire, Kern County Sheriff, Tehachapi Police Department, so on and so forth. The railroads are only required to notify Cal OES, Operations of Emergency Services, and then that kind of flows out. Now, we heard what happened and saw what happened in East Palestine, Ohio, right? I hate to use them as an example, but it's a perfect example, right? They had an issue with safety. Braking was the problem. All these twists and turns, the maintenance crew for the railroads, they go out every day, 24/7, and they grease these turns because the train jumps the tracks. It would be horrific if a tanker of something, chlorine, petroleum, fill in the blanks, derails and pops. Right? The wind blows into Tehachapi. We're known for our wind energy, renewables, right? And so the wind is always coming up the canyon. We have a very limited amount of time to be able to notify our citizens. But the railroads will not notify anyone locally. They pick up the phone and call Cal OES. That's not good enough. We live here. We need to know what's going on.
You mentioned the hazardous materials, which, of course, was what made that incident in Ohio so tragic. Do we know what kind of cargo is moving through Tehachapi?
Well, they all have placards and they all have nice numbers on them. And I'm supposing that somebody knows, and you could look that up. We see tanker cars go through, there'll be 100, 150 tanker cars. They're all joined together and they have something in them. There's some sort of liquid. And it just takes that one incident again to be catastrophic. The rail goes right through the city of Tehachapi within 150 feet of the school. We just want to be notified. We want communication lines to be opened up.
So when Union Pacific or BNSF are notifying California Governor's Office of Emergency Services about, let's say, a derailment, do you have an estimate of the time between when that derailment's happening and when Cal OES is notified? And then when that is relayed to you, is when that happens, is that happening in a timely enough manner? Or is even that concerning how long that's taking?
Well, nothing is ever relayed to the city of Tehachapi, to be clear.
Okay.
I'll give you one really good example of a long delay. East of the city of Tehachapi, there is a town called Mojave. And there was a train derailment there about a year ago, I believe. And the railroad notified Cal OES because they were tankers. Cal OES dispatched an airplane out of the Los Angeles Basin area to come up to this area in the middle of the night. It has special cameras on it to see if the tankers were leaking. That took hours and hours and hours. Kern County Fire was not even notified during this entire incident. So the railroad and Cal OES were trying to manage a potential catastrophic failure. Kern County Fire had no clue what was going on.
I know you were part of a group of people who sent a letter to Congressman Fong, now
Fong,
Congressman
that's
Fong.
correct.
Tell us
Yes.
about that letter.
So it's a letter that we spearheaded here at the City of Tehachapi, signed by the city, myself, the mayor, Kern County Fire Chief, Tehachapi Police Chief, all the different CSDs, Community Service District leaders up on the hill here. And we sent the letter just to let everybody know we're collectively very concerned. Please talk to us. Please notify us. We know that we're not qualified here at the city, anyway. I know Kern County Fire is. We're not qualified to run into an incident of this magnitude, should it occur, when it occurs, right? I'll rephrase that. It will occur at some point. These things do happen. And if you have 17 incidents in a small amount of time, then at some point you're going to have a very serious problem. So when it occurs, we just want to be ready because we have really good ways of communicating with the public and each other. We just have no line of communication between Kern County and all of its citizens and public safety services with the railroad.
Have you heard back from Congressman Fong, or what other recourse do you have at this point?
So Congressman Fong has been a great partner of the City of Tehachapi. He's part of a transportation committee, but there was a hearing in Washington, D.C. We were able to log on and listen to that. We had given him some talking points, and D.C. is very aware of what's going on, but lobbyists that work for the railroad, they're good at their job. And I understand that there was a braking issue with East Palestine, and the brakes let loose, and there were different things, and they talked about those details in great detail. And it's appalling to me that the railroads are not better managing their equipment.
So what's next for the community of Tehachapi at this point?
Well, we're going to continue to lead the charge locally, and hopefully between now and when the communication line opens, we don't have an incident that harms people. Because this is not just a Tehachapi problem. The rail lines go through lots and lots of communities across this great nation. And we need to make sure that all of our rail and trucks and vehicles and airports and aqueducts, everything is as safe as it can be.
That was Tehachapi City Manager Greg Garrett speaking with KVPR's Elizabeth Arkalian. KVPR reached out to Union Pacific for comment about the concerns raised by Garrett. In a written response, a Union Pacific official wrote, quote, "When an incident occurs on our rail lines that impacts the public, Union Pacific notifies the appropriate state and local authorities through its 24-hour response management communications center. The notifications are made in accordance with individual states' specific requirements," end quote. And that does it for today's show. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Justin Sacher. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
No matter what happens in Washington, the NPR Politics Podcast is here for you. For the latest news, insights, and analysis from the election and beyond, listen to the NPR Politics Podcast.